What's up everyone, I'm back. This video I'm going to show you an extremely weathered locomotive that I just finished up, and I am damn happy the way this thing turned out. Check this out. Yes. That would be one of my first masterpieces. Extreme weathered locomotive right there. This is one that I started about 2 years ago, and it's been sitting on my layout since then, and I decided to kick it up a notch. Went a little bit above and beyond the prototype photographs of 9721, although it's not too far off from the way this locomotive is starting to look, but I've just kind of aged it about 20-30 years there. So stay tuned and I'll show you exactly how I made this effect take place, and you too can replicate this for about $5. So first off, let's go over some of the things I used to weather this locomotive. Water-based hobby paints, and a package of various brushes and sponges. Oh, I almost forgot. I also need a rag for this one. This is a rag from a bag of painter's rags, which is nothing more than a cut up set of white t-shirts. There's also no masking that's going to be needed on the windows either for this project. For the darker brown, I used my pre-mixed brown color that I made about a year ago. I was surprised it was still good actually. I use this mostly for spraying or brushing the areas that I want to have some dirt caked on, dark colored soot, like the sides of the trucks for example. For this project though, I mostly used the triangle sponge from this kit and the one of the smaller brushes that came out of it. This kit was $5 at Hobby Lobby, and it's well worth it for the $5. It's a very good kit. Been very happy with it. For the areas of rust, I am also using some burnt sienna to blend in with the darker brown. This gives a very nice rust effect, which you'll see a little bit later in this video as I do it. I took a bit of creative liberty with this model. I wanted to do a heavily worn out locomotive weathering job. Something with many years of use on it out in the weather. I had started this project a couple years ago by looking at photos of the actual locomotive. Everything was painted with an airbrush and a regular brush at that time. The red and yellow stripes were done all by hand, as well as the silver around the windows. The yellow I used was a sunflower yellow, which turned out pretty close to the current shade of yellow that the prototype is at this point. This turned out to be a very easy weathering project, and it only took a couple of hours to do. The time really went by fast, and I didn't know how late I was staying up till I looked at the clock and I said, holy crap. For the rust areas, I dabbed a sponge into the paint ever so slightly. I don't want too much on the sponge, just enough to leave small dots basically. Kind of a dry effect, but not too dry. Once I had the rust somewhere where I liked it, I next moved to the top of the locomotive and gave it a very heavily weathered appearance. Using this silver gray, it gives the existing gray a very faded look and stands out quite a bit too. Very nice. It gives it the kind of look of like maybe a couple layers of paint and one's coming off and one's faded underneath and years of scratches and whatever else it may have encountered over the time. Brushing and dabbing the roof with a sponge gives it a very harsh and random appearance, which is something I was looking for. What's great about these paints is that they dry pretty fast, at least enough not to come off easily, but they still stay soft enough to clean off with a damp rag if there's a reason to change something or blend it in a bit. Going over the areas that have been dabbed already with a wet brush helps to softly blend the colors together. Not too much though, but just enough to soften the rust appearance and the dabbing marks a bit. This part really worked out a whole lot better than I was expecting it to. While doing something like this, you just have to let the piece tell you where to go next. Does it need more of this or more of that? Yeah, I went back and forth a few times on this locomotive. Dabbing the burnt sienna on top of the darker brown created an awesome rust effect. I mean, just gorgeous. I also used these two browns to rust up the ends of the locomotive as well. The pitted rust look is something that absolutely turns the weathering job up a few notches and makes the whole piece just very, very sick. The texture makes it look like the rust is bubbling up the paint as well, which is you just can't get that with airbrushing. I also weathered the truck similarly to the roof on this particular model. Well, now I need to do something about this yellow. It needs to be faded down a bit. That is where the rag and the finger come in brilliantly. Mixing some of the sunflower yellow with some white, I dabbed it around where I wanted to fade the yellow. This worked more like a stain than anything else. Working it in with a rag really gives more of a perfect imperfection kind of a result. Slightly varying in the differences of shade on the panels and across the entire side of the model and on the front nose and stuff like that. Plus you can also kind of fade in a little bit more of a certain area of the panel than another area of the panel. Plus it's not too much all the way, it's just enough. It's like I said, it's more like a stain the way it turned out. Just kind of rubbed it in there, and once it dried, it just looks absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous model. Tell you what, that turned into a really sweet looking locomotive. That weathering job just looks absolutely stunning, especially when you compare it to the nice, clean, fresh Kato model right behind it of the same locomotive. You can see how much that yellow has been faded out with all that technique that I did. Yes, I'm quite impressed with this, if I do say so myself. There's a few things that I'm going to have to fix, but they're just light things at this point. I need to still add a little bit of weathering powders to this. I need to do some to the trucks here. Most of this I did was for just to kind of show some faded gray coming through there. And yeah, need to weather the grills back here a little bit still. This area, I think I'm going to leave this alone. Right now, this basically looks like if it was sitting out in the weather, hasn't been ran for like 20-30 years. I'd also like to fade down the letters a little bit, but since they're decals, that might be a little bit tough to do. I'm not sure yet. I might just leave those the way they are. It's definitely quite a beautiful masterpiece, if I do say so myself, especially when you compare it to a fresh, clean engine. Keep it on the tracks. Of course, doing this level of extreme weathering was pretty easy to do without having the handrails on the locomotive. Being this is a blue box Athearn, those aren't on there out of the box, so that made this easy. This technique would not be very easy to do, probably fairly impossible with the handrails on. So something like this, I would take the handrails off, do that, but you're just not going to get that kind of effect with weathering powders and airbrushing alone. You get that nice layered effect, especially right there at the bottom of the locomotive. This is where I wanted to rust out the most, and to get the corners of the cab and stuff like that, rust pits and things like that. Yeah, that's what I was going for. The prototype for this locomotive is definitely not anywhere near this bad yet, but it's starting to go there. There's definitely some rust down in here. There's also a little bit, there's rust on the shades up here as well. And there is definitely some lightening of the yellow that's taking place. But overall, this is basically very similar to what that locomotive will probably end up looking like in 20-30 years. All the faded gray that I did down here, stuff like that. So yeah, this is basically the way it would look in probably 20 years from now, 20-30 years from now, if it's never cleaned, never restored, never repainted, anything like that. It's just ran till it's dead and ready to go on the old chopping block, pretty much. Extreme weathering. Yep, this is definitely extreme. And it looks absolutely fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. This particular technique would also work great for rolling stock. I'm going to do this on some of my rolling stock. And this will also work for model cars too. If you want to rust out some model cars, this particular shade of gray that I used would be perfect for road salt. If you wanted to do something like that. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with the way this turned out. It's really rusted and weathered piece of shit, and I absolutely love it. Thanks everyone for watching.